Report on a journey to the western states of North America and a stay of several years along the Missouri during the years 1824 to 1827 by Gottfried Duden. 19th letter, part 1, written in May 1826. Number 27. Surely you must think it strange that in all my former letters I have devoted scarcely a syllable to the Indians. But who in Germany would believe that one could live for years on the distant Missouri without being visited by Indians a single time? Because of various reports about them, they had been the chief cause of my concern for peace in the countryside. But I must tell you that no Indian has been seen in my neighborhood for perhaps 10 years. To be sure, almost every week groups of them come down the Missouri River in order to exchange wares in St. Louis or to collect annuities for relinquished areas and then return by land. But they do not leave the direct route, and they are seen only there. I met a number of Sacs in the neighborhood of St. Charles, where they had set up their tents. One often sees Indians in St. Louis, sometimes Osage, sometimes Kansas, sometimes members of the Fox tribe, sometimes Sioux, and others. They molest no one in any way, as little as do Negroes and whites. To be sure, there are still many tribes on the east side of the Mississippi, of which some, for example the Choctaws, have adopted the European way of life and customs, even owning Negro slaves and keeping inns. But few live in the state of Missouri. I say state because it is to be distinguished from the immense Missouri Territory. About 15 English miles from here on the south side of the Missouri, a Shawnee town of about 50 houses existed. Some time ago they abandoned their settlement and moved about 100 miles farther west. I do not know of any tribe west of the Mississippi that would be closer to me at present than these Shawnees. When the English incited the Indians during the war year of 1814, settlers along the Missouri suffered severely. According to an old custom, the Indians scalped every human being they could get a hold of. No child in its cradle was spared. Usually, individual Indians crept stealthily up to farms at a time when the men were absent. The scenes, which I remember so vividly here, must have been frightful. The father-in-law of my nearest neighbor, by the name of Ramsey, related again a short time ago how he had found his house after an absence of several hours. Whites and Negroes lay on the ground, murdered and scalped. Only a 5-year-old boy, a grandson of Ramsey's, was still breathing. At the sight of his grandfather, he tried to sit up and then said, "Granddaddy, the Indians did scalp me." He died soon afterward. Rarely does a scalped person survive long. Usually, death by bleeding or apoplexy or inflammation of the brain follows. However, if the wound heals, the scar is protected by an airtight plate. I saw a man who wore such a plate. He also had been stabbed in the abdomen. Now, such occurrences are no longer to be feared. The white population has increased too much. In case of a war, a number of small forts erected earlier on the outermost borders of the state would afford effective protection. If the Indians are not stirred up and given considerable assistance by another power, as formerly by the French and later by the English, their great fear of the United States easily keeps them within bounds. The inhuman behavior of the Indians, moreover, is by no means based on hatred toward the white man. In their feuds, they do not treat their red brothers any better. There is nothing more one-sided than the fanatical haranguing against the expansion of Europeans, together with sentimental paeans of praise to the Indians. A person who looks for virtue among undeveloped people connects entirely erroneous ideas with this word and introduces vague images of a biased imagination into a field that should be reserved for rational thinking. Among children, many evil acts are not committed because temptation is lacking. One can call such a negative state innocence, and to that extent the Indians can undoubtedly be compared with children. But one should bear in mind that the innocence of an adult child, if I may express myself thus, should never be confused with that of a real child. It will be unnecessary to remind you of the impulses common to all adults. When the direction of reason is lacking, adult children, as with real children, are controlled by the impulses of the moment, except that their impulses, when combined with physical strength, result in urges and actions very different from those of a child. The weaker the influence of basic principles, which are to be expected only as a result of culture, the more uncertain is the moral condition of a society within itself. The more dependent on inner contingencies without any consideration of dangerous outside influences, the lower is its true value. If after such observation one studies a group of human beings who are incited by a national custom to murder women and children in order to acquire a claim to public praise for the scalps collected, one may dare to make the assumption that this custom did not sprout in the Garden of Innocence. Similar atrocities can be compared to cancerous evils which develop on an already rotten base. Such phenomena do not occur suddenly. Who does not know how common the practice has always been among Indians to kill their own children? Just as well known here are their atrocious sexual aberrations. Bestiality and lewdness with boys are found among most tribes. What Bernhard Romans, in his concise natural and moral history of East and West Florida and New York, 1776, relates about the Chickasaws holds true also for many other tribes. Their preference for the Roman life of a hunter not infrequently results in famine, which transforms them completely into monsters. There are instances when fathers and mothers have eaten their own children. Old persons are put to death merely as an act of mercy. After such a famine, human nature must remain in a state of tension remembering such incidents, so that a feeling of innocence is forever impossible. Fantastic representations are read with pleasure. Reports of strange customs, stories of individual characteristics, and naive remarks concerning European prejudices have their value as entertainment. For that purpose, the darker side will be omitted. Nothing is more harmful than fanciful illusions when they become opinions that direct one's life. The remarks by Indians about European follies are often correct, but one must not rate them too highly. The Indians are by no means stupid. Wisdom, however, is as foreign to them as innocence. Their religious legends and tales contain not only beautiful poetic characteristics of a mind sensitive to the glory of God, but also repellent traces of brutality and moral distortion. Instead of limiting oneself to vague ideas and using the word nationality, one should consider that essentially human nature and all creatures to which the name man is applied must be assumed similar. Therefore, as far as essential characteristics are understood in the above-mentioned word, only the study of human nature can supply the answer, and mere phenomena of an unessential character are exempt from a more profound research. The ambition of uncultured people is always based on low ideals. Their efforts are directed toward physical superiority and everything that, in their eyes, gives the appearance of greater physical strength. Just as the mental world is important to children only because of its spatial power, and as in their play they love to give themselves the appearance of greater strength, adults of inferior culture also have similar ambitions. Even with regard to mental superiority, their ambition is directed solely to the external, to that which produces an outward show. From this source originate those characteristics of the Indian that philanthropic visionaries attribute to a high nobility of soul. Especially attributed to this is the feigned indifference in the presence of objects to be admired and in cases of suffering, which those visionaries confuse with Pyrrhonist stoicism. Therefore, finally, the striving for formality in relationships and the ambition to shine through externalities, especially through speeches in which they refrain as little as children from boasting. All barbarous people are and were in this respect rather similar to the Indians. Indeed, they must be called fortunate, where ambition does not lead to worse aberrations. Unlike the Indians, who methodically murder women and children,